So I personally don't think that there is a lack of Black teachers in the inner London schools. I think is an issue is the fact that we are lacking in Black leaders. In order to progress, you first have to have somebody to believe in you or endorse you. And for some reason, what we find is that Black teachers aren't getting those opportunities. Until we get that balance, we'll continue to have difficulties with our Black children in schools in the UK because that representation matters.
What has your experience been in leadership positions?
I think for me, I found the experience quite difficult, quite lonely. I really have been pleased that the changes in the curriculum of young girls being exposed to positive Black role models through literature. It's often very frustrating when you have teachers that don't understand what our young Black boys go through, that don't understand that they're making their way to school and on their way to school are being stopped and searched. There are a number of teachers that are in the profession that perpetuate a narrative of being scared of the young Black boy who becomes the young Black man. And that is quite damaging for our community. And it needs to stop because it really does affect our young Black boys. If you have that feeling of being scared of, you shouldn't work with children. Whatever was taught in that school instilled in my children something that meant that when people tried to break them down later on, they just couldn't. Because every day they were told they were amazing, they were powerful, they were going to achieve. There is institutionalized racism that goes on daily within the school system. But what that looks like is
Policing at school. There's an increased presence of police within schools. What are your thoughts about that? Yeah.
don't go to university and impact that's having on our young Black children. I keep saying to my children, I don't want you to dream what I can dream. You have to dream bigger than that. I saw for the first time in my life, Black British people standing up. John Boyega, standing in his truth, standing for all of us and supporting so many young people to do the same.
She's led schools to excellence, mentored the next generation, and raised 3 Black sons through a system that's not built for them. Meet Yvonne Dixon, powerhouse teacher, experienced senior leader, foster carer and mother. In this episode of Higher Playing Field, Yvonne shares what it takes to transform not just the classroom, but lives. With over 20 years in education, Yvonne has turned struggling schools into outstanding success stories, whilst navigating the system as a Black educator and as a parent. She breaks down the barriers facing our children, unpacks why we need more Black leaders in education, and gives real talk on how to choose schools that serve, not sideline, our kids. This one is for every parent, every teacher, every change maker that's committed to building a future where our children thrive. Let's get to it. You're listening to the Higher Playing Field podcast, where we reimagine education for Black children, one conversation at a time. This is a space for truth, strategy and vision, where parents, teachers and change makers speak honestly about the challenges in our schools. We spotlight excellence, uncover hidden wisdoms, and map out a new blueprint for our children's success, one that protects their potential and transforms our whole community. Quick note, the video quality isn't perfect on this one, but the conversation is too important not to share. Thanks for bearing with us. We hope you find it valuable. I've known you for many years, and we have raised our children together. So I know your journey in many ways. But the reality is that you have several perspectives of education. You have several perspectives of what it is to be a parent to Black children, and what it is to actually navigate the education system, both as a parent and as a teaching professional. Essentially, I would like to explore that during this call and during this conversation. People talk about there needing to be more Black teachers in the profession so that children have that representation there. What has your experience been of being a Black teacher in schools? What is your own experience of being able to progress?
So I personally don't think that there is a lack of Black teachers in the inner London schools. I think that we are sufficiently represented. What I think is an issue is the fact that we are lacking in Black leaders. And that's not in a sense that there aren't Black teachers that are capable of becoming leaders. There isn't those opportunities that are afforded to them. So it makes it very difficult for them to progress up the ladder. And until we get that balance, we'll continue to have difficulties with our Black children in schools in the UK, because that representation matters. It really makes a difference to young people to see someone that looks like them in the classroom, to aspire to take advice from somebody that looks like them, to have knowledge imparted to them, for them to absorb from someone that looks like them. And you can't underestimate that power. I've been in teaching for a very long time, and I've recognized that. But what I've also recognized is that there's also a power within us being leaders as well, and aspiring to those top positions. It means a lot to the children. It means a lot to the community. It means a lot to the parents. And we see things in a very different way. And that's important. And it really does change the way that the education that child receives looks like when there are Black leaders involved.
Okay. And you mentioned it's difficult. What is difficult? What do you think are barriers?
So there are the barriers that are there. In order to progress, you first have to have somebody to believe in you or endorse you to go on certain courses. Those courses cost money, and therefore that means that you have to have a leader that will put that investment in you. And for some reason, what we find is that Black teachers aren't getting those opportunities. The problem with that is then what you then find is once they do get that opportunity, it's about progressing to the next step. And again, that barrier is there. You then have to have somebody that believes in you and that will endorse you. And a lot of the time, we're finding that Black teachers are just not getting those opportunities, even though they are at the right place educationally. If you look at their counterparts who've been so many years in education, you're finding that you could have a Black teacher that has 6, 7 years experience, and then another teacher comes along from the white community who has 2 years experience, and yet they're endorsed on those leadership programs, and that Black teacher who's been in that for 6 or 7 years is not. And it's a very unfair system, and the way it's done is very unfair. And it's something that the only way to address it is if you have Black leaders who are making those decisions. So the more Black leaders you have that make those decisions, the more opportunities are then cascaded down. If those Black leaders are true Black individuals wanting to inspire and endorse and support the Black community. And I do say that as well, because they're very different types of leaders when you get to the top as well.
Mm-hmm. What has your experience been in leadership positions? Because you have been part of several senior leadership teams. So, how have you found that experience?
I think for me, I found the experience quite difficult, quite lonely, and a lot of the time quite frustrating. Often I find myself in a position where I'm questioning why I came into the position. But often, why did I choose this profession? Or why did I go into this position? Because now I'm going to have to deal with things that I don't really want to have to deal with. And often having a recognition that a lot of the times the battles that I have had to fight haven't been my own. It's actually always bigger than me. And for every door I open for myself, I open 10 to 15 or more doors for other people. And I suppose that's the thing that keeps me going.
Mm, okay. We've talked about your journey a little bit. What has been your experience of working with Black community in schools, working with Black children?
I do have some key thoughts. I think my first key thought is that all children are amazing. Black children are often beyond our wildest dreams. The ability, the capacity, the mindset that a lot of our young Black children have is out of this world often. And I have had the experience of teaching so many amazing children. I feel that the experience of our Black children in schools that I've witnessed for myself can often be difficult because sometimes they're being taught by people that don't understand them. And they don't realize that through their words, through their actions, that it can be quite damaging to a young Black child because they're saying things to them that often can it can damage them to the point that it shapes them as an adult and how they view opposing races or how they even view themselves as individuals. If I
Mm,
look at experiences of young Black girls and how they wear their hair and when they get to the point where they want to experiment with makeup and when they're experimenting with their clothing and rules that can be dictated to them that can really dampen their spirits. I'm so glad that it's been exposed about the fact that we are not our hair and that hair is a part of expression and children should be allowed to express themselves and not be dampened to say, oh, you have to have your hair straight or you have to have your
mm,
hair natural. There's a lot of rules that were put in place that really suppressed young Black women. And I'm so glad that so many young people have spoken out, have really been determined to stick to who they are. And that's actually paved the way for others to actually speak out against that type of undercurrent way of suppressing a young Black lady. The other thing that I think has been quite damaging is what is being read within the classroom. And I really have been pleased that the changes in the curriculum, but more importantly, the changes in the mindset based on having the internet or young girls being exposed to positive Black role models through literature that if we didn't have the channels that we have now, they wouldn't be exposed to. Just seeing their beauty in all its shapes, in all of its forms, I think is so powerful. And it's been a shame over the years that I've witnessed that there's some teachers that have tried to dampen that. And I hope that those types of teachers slowly die out from the profession and more come through that are much more
mm.
diverse in their thinking and understanding and really thinking about the power of their words and the impact that it has or on young Black women specifically, young Black girls specifically. With our young Black boys, I feel that as an educator, it is a damaging thought to believe that there is a limitation to what a young black boy can achieve. And I think it's often very frustrating when you have teachers that don't understand what our young black boys go through, that don't understand that they're making their way to school, and some of them on their way to school are being stopped and searched. That people don't understand that they're finishing from homework club and they're making their way home and they're being stopped and searched. That when they're in their communities, they're battling with things that are going on in their community that they're trying their best to avoid and do the right thing and focus on education. But other socioeconomic factors come into play that stop them from doing that. And this is not the story of all of our children. And so this brush that all young black boys come from poor upbringing with single parents, etc., is a narrative that I think that needs to stop. There are so many parents that I have worked with over the years that are together, black parents, mum and dad, that are together. There are so many black parents, mum and dad, that even if they're not together, they're working together. So many black families that if there is a reason why mum and dad are not together, there's aunties and uncles that are stepping in and being supported. And it's a shame that often people miss that community link, that they miss the fact that this negative narrative is often spewed, even in textbooks and in literature, that all black people come from impoverished backgrounds and are struggling, etc. And I've actually seen the opposite. But the main thing that I most despise, and I use the word despise, is when I am in school and I see how educators can treat young black boys with such disdain, with a view that they're scared of them. If they talk, if they stand, if they raise their voice, they're trembling. These types of behaviors really affect our young black boys. And for me, if you are not able to see a child as a child, you shouldn't be in education. And often there are a number of teachers that are in the profession that perpetuate a narrative of being scared of the young black boy who becomes the young black man. And that is quite damaging for our community. And it needs to stop because it really does affect our young black boys. And I say this not just as an educator, but also as a parent of 3 black boys, 2 of which are over 6 foot now, and the third is on his way to do so. And people don't understand that their actions can really damage our young black boys of all shapes and sizes. So it's not about them just being 6 foot. It's about if their voices are deeper than others, that's threatening. That isn't threatening. They just have a deep voice. Their color of their skin shouldn't affect the way in which you treat them. And if you have that feeling of being scared of, you shouldn't work with children, all children, because that's the wrong way to treat a child of any color. We've got to learn to understand, to see the good and purity and amazing that's in all of our boys. And if you're not able to see that, then you shouldn't be in education. I do not like seeing, and I say this again for things that I've witnessed, teachers who their intention is to break down the young black man, to make him become a robot or not have feelings or not want to say anything or not
Like
answer
breaking
back.
course, isn't it? Yeah.
Exactly. And to me, I
Yes,
see it as no better than a slave master who tries to break down a slave to do what they want them to do. It's not right, and it shouldn't be in our education system. And I, for one, know that when I have seen it, I've called it out.
Right.
But then when you are a person who calls things out, you become unpopular, you become targeted. And so I've had to navigate through education and still stay true to who I am and what I believe. Because for me, we leave behind a legacy, not just in our own children, but in every child that we come across and we meet. And I hope and pray that throughout my time that I've touched and supported and helped more lives than I've destroyed, if I've ever destroyed.
Because you have the power for both, don't you, as a teacher?
Exactly.
It's interesting because that is certainly a theme that I talk about quite a bit. The fact that I've got two boys, and the experience is that actually a lot of our young Black boys are going into classrooms where they are feared every day,
Exactly.
and they're accused every day. And I think it's a very difficult thing to identify because it happens so subtly initially. And it's a very hard thing to change because we are in a society where the narrative and the programming is Black faces equal violence, Black faces equal poverty, Black faces equal not educated,
Absolutely.
Black faces equal danger.
Yeah.
So there is almost an unconscious, immediate response
Prejudice.
that is
Yeah.
fearful
Yeah.
as soon as
Yeah.
our boys
Absolutely.
are in those spaces. How can we as parents prepare our children for that?
So I have realized through raising my own children that in the end, it comes down to the home that you are raised in. And if you are constantly speaking truth, power, and daily that your children are able to listen to your conversations, the environments that you put them in, the people that you surround them in the end, that is what's going to carry them through more than anything else. When they look to their left and they see their fathers, their uncles doing exceptionally well, and they look to their right and they see their cousins doing exceptionally well, and these are all Black men. When they are young women and they look to their left and they see their mum, and then they look to their right and they see their aunties, and they look to their left again and they see their mum's friends, and so on. All of these positive imagery that you surround your children by, and it's very hard to do that, so you have to be very careful with the circles that you keep. By creating those positive environments, in the end, that's what will count. In the end, that's what will count. And I have learned through my own children, that's what counts. If I was to do a do-over, I would home educate my children. And I have every intention of, when I get to the point when I have grandchildren, to home educate them and have private tutors for them. Because I realize that there is a lot of power in you being very careful about who is surrounding your child and what they're saying to them, and controlling that environment, and how dangerous it can be when the wrong people come into conjunction with your child. And I say that because there is a very different response when a 7-year-old is facing somebody that is saying negative things and teaching them the wrong thing, etc., versus a 17-year-old versus a 27-year-old. Having that opportunity to really nurture and support your child and not have the negativity surrounding them is so important. And whatever you do correctly early on with your child, it will keep on going right up until they're adults. And I've definitely seen that with my children who had the amazing experience of going to Springfield Christian School in Sydenham, and the experiences that they had of having very powerful teaching from African teachers who were from Ghana, who were from Sierra Leone, who were from Nigeria, male and female, but predominantly male, really shaped, especially my two older ones, in terms of how they experienced education later on. Whatever was taught in that school instilled in my children something that meant that when people tried to break them down later on, they just couldn't, because every day they were told they were amazing, they were powerful, they were going to achieve, they had to reach for the moon, the stars, whatever they wanted to achieve, they could do it. And that was taught to them over and over again for years. Can't be erased. Can't be erased.
Yeah, that's interesting because, obviously we had that same experience. We met through the fact that our children went to the same schools when they were young. And I agree. What I realized with some of my friends is the battle that many parents are having at secondary school. A lot of my friends have had to have even at primary school. And we were very lucky to escape quite a lot of that.
Yeah.
That environment was just loving. There's no other real way of putting it. You dropped your child off and it was almost like dropping your child off with their grandparents. You knew
Exactly.
that they were loved and they were so valued and so seen in that environment. What for you were the main differences between the two systems? Because I think I'm trying to remember the age of the children. I think they're about 8 and 5, maybe, when they moved across to normal system.
Yeah, I think moving them across to prep school, I don't regret that decision at all.
Mm.
I think that the difference was the loving aspect of things. And that's not to say that the prep school didn't love the children. It's just to say that it wasn't like dropping your children off to their grandparents. But it was a different experience. The thing that I found with prep school, when the children moved across, is that they got their first experience of working in an environment where not everybody expected amazing from young Black boys. Sometimes I would get comments like, "Oh, he's a good runner. We're hoping he could be amazing in track when he's older." And it was like, no, I'm not really aspiring for my son to be a runner. I'm aspiring for him to be something else. I don't know what that was, but just not a runner. And it was those sorts of comments that used to really dampen my spirits, and often feeling that he wasn't being pushed, the children weren't being pushed enough because they're not going to probably be the next prime minister sort of thing. Whereas actually, I wanted them to push my child like they believed that he could be the next prime minister, because there was that possibility. And I felt that there just came a turning point for me with both of the boys where the teachers started to get that I wanted the absolute best for them, and that I wasn't going to stop getting on their backs until that was achieved, because I'm paying a lot of money for them to be at the school. So I feel that it really changed the children, because suddenly they went from a loving, caring environment to an environment that was really alien to them, and with teachers that were much more regimental and often they came across situations where something would happen and it would be the black boys as opposed to all of the other children that were in the school. And they had to deal with that. And I don't feel that they should have gone through that experience, but I'm glad they went through it then because it helped them for later on when they came across it in secondary school. And now for the older ones, when they're coming across it in the workplace, they've learned how to deal with it. And I think for having conversations with my sons, I've learned as well, a lot of the time they've been able to deal with things because they know who their mum is. And they know, okay, well, you can say that. You're going to have to speak to my mum about that. And I feel that having that confidence has also really helped our children in very difficult circumstances, because there have been some very difficult circumstances whilst they've been in school, accused of things that they didn't do, and you're having to go in there and really champion for your child. And if I'm being honest, when it comes to my children's education, I just can't wait for it to finish, which is why I said, and I'd say this wholeheartedly, if I was to do it over again, I would homeschool.
Tell me about secondary school. There is something that happens during that transition to secondary school, and I see a lot of people, particularly around sort of year 8, year 9, start to fall down a hole sort of thing. What is that challenge, both from the perspective of a teacher and from the perspective of you as a parent? What do you think that challenge is?
The challenge is hormonal. The
Mm,
reality is that the child is growing up and they will now start to push back on things. Whereas before you say detention and they're quivering in the boots, now they're saying, well, actually, I don't want to go to the detention. Actually, I'm a man now. Don't talk to me like that. That's what I see as the change. And, as a teacher, there's ways of dealing with that. Being firm and fair. That's how I like to be when it comes to children as they're navigating through that experience. Being firm, but being fair. And when children see that you're firm and fair, they usually will come around. Not all. Some children just never want to be disciplined, and that's just the way it goes. But for the overwhelming majority, if you're firm and you're fair, they'll always respect you for it. I think from the other side, as a parent, you're also experiencing those difficulties at home. Having to speak to your child more than once, having them answer back, having them not follow your rules at a certain point. And again, I think for me, having 3 boys has helped, because when the first one's going through, you're like, oh, what's going on here? By the time it comes to the second, no, I know this phase, I've been through this phase sort of thing.
mm.
So yeah, it is difficult. It is difficult when they're answering back, sometimes being disrespectful. But again, love always wins. If it's your child and you love them, you nurture them, support them, in the end, love will always win. And if you have that firm foundation and that connection with your child, eventually they will get through it. But it's not easy.
It's not easy. And I think it's very challenging to get them through school in those spaces, because sometimes we feel, as a parent of a Black child, you feel like there isn't the same response to certain things.
Almost, I would actually say, from my perspective as a teacher, seeing other teachers do certain things with young Black boys specifically, overreaction is the word that I would use.
Mm.
It's already been proven time and time again on the legal field through testimonies from various teachers that there is institutionalized racism that goes on daily within the school system. But what that looks like is you'll get a young Black boy who will do something and he would get suspended or excluded, as we say now, for a week. And then another child, white counterpart, do the exact same thing and not get anything apart from a telling off.
Yeah.
And that disparity is what then causes the animosity and the falling out amongst the children, because they're very aware of that, very aware of that. And what is also a difficulty when you're a leader within that is, even when you're trying to be firm and fair and where you're trying to be consistent, because those around you are inconsistent, your consistency becomes pointless. Your fairness starts to become pointless. You still do it because it's the right thing to do, but you're in a system where around you people are doing the wrong thing. And so therefore, when you're doing the right thing, it then becomes difficult.
And I'm all about systems. So what the transparency of this, is it hard for us to see within schools data in regards to sanctioning versus ethnicity?
So the reality is that it isn't hard, and this information, if requested, has to be shared. However, there are other things that can stop you from gaining information. Safeguarding is one, because if there is a view that particular data is sensitive and safeguarding related, then you won't be able to get hold of it. Number two, if you have governors within your school system that ask the right questions and are actually interested in the way the school is running and holds the head teachers to account, then you'll find less of that in that particular school, because they know that somebody's keeping an eye on things.
Right.
So school governance is a way of, and becoming a school governor is a way of ensuring that the system isn't rigged against particular groups.
Yeah.
You can also, if you had a concern, request that information or contact the DFE to say that you have concerns about the way in which sanctions are being imposed unfairly, etc. So there are things that you can do. However, one thing that we are sure of, and one thing I can be absolutely clear on as an educator, is if people want to hide things, it's very easy to do. And often the lack of transparency is the ability for people to hide things. And so therefore, when the information is being obtained, it's actually incorrect because it's been manipulated and massaged to give a better figure than what is the reality. A question that was asked recently by a parent to me personally was that they went to a school that was deemed as outstanding, but when they went there, from what they could see, it wasn't even a needs to improve. They were very concerned about what they saw on the visit that they went to. And so my answer to that is, whilst Ofsted has a rating for certain things, that can't be your only measure of where you put your child. You do have to look at the makeup of the staff. You do need to look at how the staff are treating the students. You do need to go on days that are non-visiting days. You do need to sit outside of the school and look at how the children come into school and go out, because I'm telling you, the biggest indicator of how those children are treated is looking at how they leave the school and how they enter. So there's so many things that you can do to try to help your child to be in a better environment. But then you're also faced with the fact that if there are schools where the children are loved, respected, cared for, those are the schools that are oversubscribed and it's hard to get your child into. So I think a better bet is for education landscape to actually be a place where all children don't end up feeling like they shouldn't be a part of it. And I know I've been in education a long time, and that was a mission when I got in, and I still don't see it. I still don't see it. I try within my own school to ensure that it doesn't have those types of behaviors from teachers, but it needs to be more than one school that's doing that. It needs to be loads of schools, the overwhelming majority that have that as a plight. And from what we've been seeing recently on the internet, there's a lot of educators who are not caring about the children and who continuously are showing, recently with Child Q, as we've seen, that they're not there to protect our young Black children. And that's devastating.
So it's interesting you bring up child cues. Yes, there are these cases that spring up. What do you think about the resolution? I've had a couple of conversations with actual lawyers that have been involved in cases like that and who work in that education sphere. A lot of them are exhausted. They're just tired.
Mm.
And what I'm seeing, particularly as a parent and someone in the community, is that these things that are very obviously problematic happen. And then it can take years
Mm.
to resolve through courts. And then it's brushed under the carpet. So really what happens is that nothing happens. The behavior doesn't change because no one really sees the consequence.
Mhm.
And everyone is quite silent about the case because it's in court, so everything dies down. They battle on for however many years. When it does resolve, whatever happens, there's a tiny little apology somewhere that no one sees. But it doesn't change the behavior.
Mm. I think if we're looking at, there's been quite a few incidents that have happened within school where the internet has taken over and things have gone viral. Okay.
Mm,
I actually feel that I'm proud of a lot of our young children of all races who have managed to take their phones out and comment on things that they feel that are wrong. And they're right, that they are wrong. The overwhelming support in the child Q case, it was actually the young people that galvanized the support, because what they saw was something happened and they were enraged about what was happening. And it's actually their behaviors and then the community taking that on that led to resolutions and lessons to be learned for the community, for the school. There needs to be more of that. There needs to be community responses and action taken quickly. Recently, I was watching a video of somebody who in Croydon who was being arrested by the police or manhandled by the police. There's a better word to use. And in front of her child, in front of her child. And again, recognizing the impact that has on the community, but also the response to that incident needs to be from the community, holding people to account and holding them to account quickly. And how do you do that? How you do that is not by having little conversations at 2:00 in the daytime when nobody can attend the meeting. How you do that is you have a response. And so the only way things are going to get better is with individuals actually being organized so that when things like this happen, they are ready, but also being proactive, as we've seen some in our community are trying to do, that the education is provided. So then there's not the excuse. We have individuals within the community that are trying to work with our police, that are trying to work with our teachers, I know at the moment there's someone that comes around talking about unconscious bias and really getting people to think about their unconscious bias, explaining to them what it looks like, how it comes across when they automatically are thinking things about individuals based on their race, background, etc. So all of these things exist. So then when you are still doing things like this, then you don't have an excuse. You don't have an excuse. And then there should be a process. And that process should be where you see this taking place and this behavior is taking place, that this is what's the consequence. And it's just consistent. But we don't have that yet. We don't have these responses, and we can't keep allowing things to happen to us. We have to be proactive before something happens to us. So before I go on the bus and something happens and then I'm being handcuffed and my child is screaming and crying, before that happens to me as an individual, what am I doing to support my community in making sure that doesn't happen to me or to my neighbor or to my neighbor's neighbor? And until we have that community spirit, until we organize ourselves in that way and we see other communities that they do it, yeah, you can't say anything about them without everybody galvanizing together and getting ready and lawyering up and whatever. All of those communities that are able to do that, we have the same resources. We just need to get together and make sure that we're working together proactively. And that's where the change will come, Des. That is where the change will come. And having real people represent us, and real people that look like us, live in our communities, experience what we experience, so that when they are talking for us, they really are talking for us. Not talking for us because they look like us, but they don't have any connection to our lives. That's not for us. Yeah. That's just someone that happens to share a skin color. That's not for us. Someone who is in our community, who looks like us, has our experiences, and is really talking for us. We need more of that, especially in government. And especially in spaces where you are speaking to the Metropolitan Police about change, especially in spaces where you are impacting on education. Someone who will recognize that there's certain things that are happening and that's incorrect, and this is how it's going to be addressed, and you address it very quickly.
Do you feel that in education they have taken up that mantle? They understand there is an issue there? I think particularly I'm thinking about the Child Q case, in which very publicly, I think, the police apologised and have gone down this particular road. But I'm left thinking, okay, that parent left that child with those teachers.
Yeah.
Where is your accountability for your safeguarding?
Yeah. There was recently apologies made, lessons learned, and a statement given from the local authority that where Child Q actually happened. So I know that definitely is a step in the right direction. I think in a wider context of things that have happened in various different schools, the answer to your question is no. I do not feel that there's been a sufficient response that actually tackles the difficulties that Black children are facing in schools. There isn't. And so I go back to where I started, where I said, because of that, it makes it very difficult for me to, at this stage, say, yes, the English education system is for our children and our children will thrive. In some schools, yes, but not in all.
Most.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's it.
Policing at school. There's an increased presence of police within schools. What are your thoughts about that?
I think, from my perspective, I think that it can be positive and negative. I think that it can be positive for children to have an understanding of the police force and how they work, and to build positive relationships with police that work within their community, so that if they needed them, they're able to call and feel confident that they will be listened to and supported. I actually feel that increased police presence within a school is negative because it's not a consistent role within all schools. So if you go to a school and there's active police presence, you're not going to want to send your child there. If you go to a school and they've got police arches to see if children have knives, etc., or they're wanding children as they go through, you're not going to want to send your child to a school like that. And so that's where I see it's negative. It's not necessarily the actual police officers who are working with the children that are negative, because a lot of the time they can actually be quite positive with the young people they work with. They're working with them every day. However, the negative aspect is that no one wants to send their child to a school where there's active police presence, because if there is, it's because something's wrong. And if something's wrong, it's never going to be anything good. But it can provide such a negative response, similar to if you have a lot of police presence at the end of the school day. And this is what I said, that you have to look at a school beginning of the day and the end of the day, because if the children are leaving school and they're behaving in a certain way in uniform specifically, then it shows that there's a lot going on negatively within that school during the day. When you see children leaving in a harmonious and positive way, having had a great day, great interactions, positive input, etc., and they're leaving in a purposeful way without coming out to have fights and disagreements, etc., again in their school uniform, and I must point that bit out, then you know something is going on of a positive nature and supportive nature within that environment, and caring that they care about the way in which they behave whilst in uniform.
Absolutely.
I think that we just have to be careful who we leave our children with. We really do.
I think it's very difficult. That it's a very difficult thing to, as a pet, especially if it's the first time your child has gone through school. If you've got the oldest child, working out how to evaluate a school. Everyone looking at league tables, and you're looking
That's
at
it.
just reports, but actually,
That's
a lot of the times it's a suck it and see. It's only when they're there that you realize, oh, okay, they're not doing. There's all of these other things that
exactly.
are either happening or not happening.
And I think your podcast and also trying to formulate a community so that parents can ask these questions. And I've gone through the system now. I've got 3 boys. I'm only down to the last one going through secondary school. So I know a little bit. So if you ask me about certain schools and information based on that, I can support. But so can so many others. So if we worked in a community way of sharing information about our experiences, it will help parents to make a better informed decision.
Yeah.
I recently was supporting somebody looking for primary school for their child. And in the end, his conclusion was, I'm going to educate my child abroad. That was his solution. That once we went through all of the pros and cons of the various different schools, he just felt for him and his family, it would be better for him to educate his child abroad.
But I think even that is a powerful thing, isn't it? That you touch base with the community, you actually sit and collectively evaluate. Because just like you're saying, if I had a redo, I would home educate. If I had a redo, I think I would take boys abroad. So I think it's interesting. It's we do need to do that collaboration. We do need to get the information, because at the end of the day, it is in our community. And I think it's important that when we've gone through the minefield, we don't skip off into the dawn. We actually look back and help the people that are behind us.
That's right. That's right. And I think we always have that drawing up the ladder analogy, which is often a stain on our Black community, that people are going through these things and then drawing up the ladder and off they go into the rainbow. Whereas actually what you should be doing is it should be a rope system, as it were, where as you go through, you're holding on to the next person who's holding on to the person after that, so that we all can get through, not necessarily on a ladder, but on a rope, getting over the top and moving on together, as opposed to individually, which would be actually much better for everybody.
Yeah, and it's a legacy of growing up and being taught in this space and in this country, where you feel like we grew up learning that there's only space for one at the table. So we haven't yet
Yeah,
really elevated that element of
that's right.
collaboration.
I think recently there's been a lot of highlight about Black excellence and the recognition of Black excellence within the UK, and just that understanding that there's so much amazing going on.
Yeah.
It needs to be highlighted and celebrated. But it's also important for us to highlight that to our children as well, so that they understand that's something to aspire to. It's not just one person who became a journalist. Actually, there's hundreds of Black journalists who are doing fantastic things in the UK and all around the world. There are amazing opportunities. Again, I'll say it, but beyond our wildest dreams, because often I keep saying to my children, I don't want you to dream what I can dream. You have to dream bigger than that, because I can only see so far. You can see further than me. And as the generations go, they'll see even further. There's so much that we can achieve together. We need to constantly encourage our children to know that endless possibilities are there for them, you know?
So, last few questions.
Yeah.
Since BLM, what have been the things that you've seen, changes that you've seen that you have really loved seeing? And what have been the things that you wish had happened and haven't yet come into being?
So I think the things that I've loved seeing with regards to BLM is how active young people were within the movement and still are. That confidence that they had within themselves, that wasn't just coming from America, it was coming from our young people in Britain. And I saw for the first time in my life Black British people standing up and talking and shouting and saying what needed to be said in the most eloquent way. If I was to talk about life-changing pivotal moments, was John Boyega. I don't know if I'm saying his name correctly, but
Yeah, absolutely.
for me,
Mm.
especially having a son that is an actor, it was a life-changing moment to see somebody step out on faith, knowing what we all knew, that would either go right or left. It would either mean his career ended at that moment,
Absolutely.
or his career
Taking up,
would succeed. And
standing in his truth. Yeah.
it was just standing in his truth, but also in standing in his truth, standing for all of us and supporting so many young people to do the same and to not be fearful to do so. And I don't even think he understands, maybe he does. I've watched a few interviews where he talks about that moment, but I really don't think he understands that he had that Obama moment. He had that
Yeah,
moment
absolutely.
where he stood up and he spoke and he changed so many lives with the words that came out of his mouth that day. And I'll forever be grateful for what he said and the impact it had on me, but also the impact it had on my boys.
Yeah.
Things that I would like to happen, I still haven't seen the gap close when it comes to Black children and their achievements overall. So we're still at that stage where it's ones and twos who are getting through in terms of the system. It shouldn't be that way. It needs to be hundreds,
Yep.
should be hundreds of
Mhm.
Black children who are successful at GCSE, that then becomes hundreds of children that are going to A-levels, that becomes hundreds of children that go on to do degrees, then hundreds of children that enter the political field or something else.
Mm.
And then when the hundreds, then it becomes thousands and so on. I think people really underestimate how the small those figures are as you go up through the education system. And that's really concerning. So it dwindles down, and I haven't got the exact percentages, but it's not what it should be. And we're far from where we should be. And with the introduction of university now going to be at a cost where you have
Sorry,
with
hold
a
on.
percent, I think that we underestimate the percentages and how low they are. And we really need to be very careful about the narrative of you're going to be in debt and you're not going to have any money. Don't go to
Massive.
university.
Yeah.
Don't go to university. And
Mhm.
impact that's having on
Yeah.
our young Black children, because if they speak to the wrong person, they may not feel that they are able to go to university because of the debt that they're going to be in. And
I
that is
add
really,
to
really
that.
concerning.
I was very shocked at the amount of children that are really very worried about that. I attended one of the Urban Synergy mentoring events in a London school. And almost every table that I sat at to speak to these kids that were probably between 14 and 15, almost all of them were saying, I can't afford to go. And it just wasn't an option for them. It can't afford to go. So I think that we have to make sure that we are putting out the right information. Having a son that is just going through university now and another one just about to go, I know the cost of university is very different from what it was certainly when we were there. So
Mm,
yeah, that's a space that we need to start to do work in terms of exposing, making the sort of scholarship process more transparent, and
absolutely.
actually, yeah, making it more reachable. It's absolutely
And
essential.
exactly, and explanation,
Mm.
statistics, understanding. For example, in my family, it's a non-negotiable. You're going to university, and that's the narrative that is perpetuated amongst the children in the family. You're going to university, and they follow that route because you're going to university. And so all of the noise about finance not really bothering our children in our family. However, I'm in education, and that is a problem where I'm speaking to young people, and if they don't get the right teacher to speak to them and explain it properly
Mm.
about how the finance is going to work, it will really put them off. There's a big impact and a knock-on effect if we have lots of young Black children who don't go to university. And I'm not saying that university is the only way. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is that there is a power in education. There is a power in education. And for those of us who have managed to navigate and to do well, but also pivot and continue to do well even when bad things have happened, it's because of our education that we've been able to do that. And I think that's what we have to be very careful with, that, this is my humble opinion, that there is a purposeful narrative that is being spread for our community to not go to university, which will then affect their overall socioeconomic status as time goes on. And that will be eventually a problem.
Yeah.
And that won't, the gap that's widening between rich and poor, and I use that word in quotation, or those words in quotation, it will get wider.
Absolutely.
As less opportunities are afforded to certain communities over others. We have to be so unapologetic with our children in things that we're saying to them, and give them that understanding, get them involved so that they speak to the right people about what is going to happen next. Because if they speak to the wrong person, if the wrong person giving them information, you will go to schools as you have and find everybody saying they're not going to university. And that would only come because the teachers are supporting that narrative, because whoever is doing the careers is supporting that narrative. Whoever is leading that school is supporting that narrative. And these are purposeful things that will affect our community.
Absolutely. Thank you, my love. Thank you. I want to say a massive thank you to you. I know that you have always inspired me. And I know that you just, I can't imagine the lives and the generations of people that you have touched, because you care and because you really love children, and you always have done for all the time that I've known you. Yeah, one of the things that I've learned as my sons have come through the system is actually, when you impact a child, you impact that family. When you impact family, you impact a community. So I thank you for all the work that you do on an everyday basis. And you're, for me, a wonderful role model as a mother also. Okay, so thank you. Thank you for spending some time today. Love you.
Bless you. Love you
All
so much.
right.
Yeah.